The greatest power you possess is your ability to choose. Join Lowe's Moore as he reveals how you can begin to maximize that power by exploring yourself on the deepest levels and committing to making lasting and positive changes. Get ready to achieve breakthroughs that will lead to accelerated growth and transformation, because you are now tuned in to The Blueprint.
Why the actions contradict the lamb. I'm fellowshipping when I'm with the fam. That's more relations, that's forming a phonic.
Good morning and welcome back. This is Lowe's Moore, and I want to again welcome you to the Blueprint Podcast. And this is our special edition. You know that we each week we're on Sunday evenings from 7 to 9, 7 to 9:30. 7 to 8:30 on Sundays, and this is a special edition, a Saturday morning, and occasionally we've had a few of these, and so we're on this morning, and of course, you know, the favorite word of the show is I'm excited. I'm excited. I mean, some people are not excited about getting up early on Saturday, but when I have two special guests, so I'm really excited to have them here on the show with me. They're part of the family. And so, again, welcome back. And I want to say thank you up front. I want to say thank you for your support of the Blueprint. Hope you continue to enjoy it. And let me, I want to start out because on Thursday, I had the privilege on Thursday to attend the newly formed Bronx Basketball Hall of Fame. I mean, it was over 300 people there, and of course, I was trying to be safe. You know, a lot of people weren't, but I was trying to be safe. But I'm glad I went. Was invited by several people to come, and of course, I'm not from the Bronx, but you know, it was interesting to walk in and people saying, "Oh, this," you know, I introduced myself. "Oh, Lowe's Moore. Oh, yeah, Westchester. Oh, you welcome." I was like, "I'm welcome." Yeah, I know I'm not from the Bronx, but you know, you see there, that's Bill Modest. I mean, I always say to Bill when I see him, he's the far on the left side, little short guy. He's an official, a New York official, refereed in college and stuff. Like Bill is 87 years old, and he's still officiating. I mean, he's still running up and down. I seen him. First thing I say, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. I want to be 87, and I want to be able to run up and down the floor. Julius Allen, former basketball player and coach. Ricky Silvers was there. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame along with Rod Strickland. Was there. He got inducted, and you know, Rod is now with LSU as the head coach of LSU, and then Nate Tiny Archibald, right? I think there's a little picture of where we have Nate Tiny Archibald, Dick McGuire, Dolph Shades, Ricky Silvers, Floyd Lane, and Sandy Ortez. I mean, what a great lineup, and it was even more of them. But just to see people, I mean, you know, particularly from the Bronx, and I had my moment in the Bronx, right, where I played with Gauchos as a high school player, one of the, you know, great youth basketball programs. And my brother played with Riverside, back in the day. So we've had some experience down in the Bronx. Here's my quick story on the Bronx. The Bronx, the guys in the Bronx like to dribble. So they used to dribble a whole lot, right? We used to shoot the ball. We didn't do a whole lot of dribbling. We just put the ball in the basket. But they did a lot of dribbling. And I played against a lot of wonderful guys. And I got the chance to meet Nate Tiny Archibald back in the day, man, in the Bronx. My cousin lived in the Bronx, and I was always down there. What a special person, man. Nate's speech was amazing. He didn't focus on basketball. He focused on that we need the changes here, and we need to be a part of that change by saving our youth. And so I commend Tiny Archibald. But it was a really great evening to see so many wonderful people and so many amazing players and so many amazing mentors. You know, everybody was shouting out the person that led them to success, talking about the men or women that came into their lives and changed their lives, man. It was good to see that those people were there too, as well, shouting out their mentors and coaches and friends and family members. So, again, it was, hey, next year, I'm sure they're going to have another class next year. Look out for it. They're trying to build and grow and develop programs. The Bronx Basketball Hall of Fame first annual was last on Thursday, and I'm looking forward to the second annual next year. So let's jump right into it. I got my seed here. Go my pebble. Throwing my pebble in the pond. Right. I'm expecting a ripple effect of the show today. I'm expecting just an amazing show. So let's jump right into this. I gotta get through this stuff quick here. So let me start out with my book of the week. Yeah, the four disciplines of execution, right? One name you would remember is Sean Covey. Um, who done a number of great books, but this is one book that I used to actually received it at a Boys and Girls Club conference a few years ago, and tried to implement it into the practice of the business at the Boys and Girls Club. But this is an awesome book. They have actually uh, done a second edition to this. So make sure you look at that second edition, and if you're looking to understand the importance of execution, right, the four disciplines of execution, you should get that. You should get this book. It's amazing to add some best practice and practical application to your business. So, and then here's my word of the week. Right, of course there's several words, but last week was love, but the fruit of the spirit, right, is love, and then there's the attributes of love, and one of the words I pulled out of the fruit of the spirit is joy, right? Man, if you don't have no joy, you're in trouble. For that's my word of the week, man. And scripturally it says, let nobody, let nothing in my um, personal thoughts, let nothing steal your joy, right? And that's my word of the week, right? Hang your hat on joy, right? Enjoy yourself. You hear me every day. When if you're gonna hear it at the end of the show, right? If you wake up tomorrow, make tomorrow, as John Wooden said, make tomorrow your masterpiece, right? So, and then here's my affirmation, right? It says, in life, this is my Hill and Pierce Harper affirmation quote moment. It says, in life, you will realize there is a role for everyone you meet. Uh, some will test you, some will love you, some will teach you, but the ones who are truly important are the ones who bring out the best in you. And that's my affirmation of and quote moment of the week, right? Find somebody who bring the best out of you. And then next, I got my music. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this or not. Rihanna is doing a theme song for Wakanda Forever, and it says the song is "Lift Up, Lift Me Up," and I got a chance to listen to it a couple of times because sometimes you're looking at the movie and you hear the song and you don't know who's singing the song, but uh, she actually wrote the song for the movie. And then my movie of the week, Wakanda Forever, is coming out November the 11th, right? And I'm looking forward to it. Chadwick Boseman, man, that was a hard one to take, and everybody's feeling that. But we've been working over the last couple of weeks. I don't know if we'll get it done, but the first Black Panther we actually send 100 kids to the first showing that day. We're working on doing the same thing on November 11th. Hopefully, we'll be able to do it. Yeah, everything's getting a little strange with the movie theaters and different things like that. But we're trying again to sponsor 100 kids to go to the first showing. So hopefully, pray for us that we get that done. And then I got some birthday shout outs. My wife called this Broke Vimbo. I want to say happy birthday to Steve, my son-in-law. I want to say happy birthday to him and to my other son, Omar. He's down there in South Carolina. I want to say happy birthday to O, the big O. Yeah. And then, Mooney. She turned 1 earlier in, I think it was October. Yeah, late October, the 30th, I think it may have been. Happy birthday, Mooney. Man, and then last week also we're celebrating Hartley's birthday today with the birthday party at 12 o'clock. I want to say happy birthday to them. And then Amaya. Woo, man, Pop was on duty on yesterday, man. All day long. I had Hartley, Mooney, they both won. And then I also had Dakota, he's 2. And then later on in the afternoon, I had Amaya. So I had all 4 grandkids yesterday. Man, my wife was coming home from Albany, and she was calling me, but I was knocked out. They knocked me out. I was gone. But I love them. They had mad energy, and I was hugging on them, and I got pop magic too, because I put them all down, right? Oh, they was all down for about an hour and a half. They was all knocked out. I show a video like this, how you do it. You knock them all out. You just love on them, and then when you say it's nap time, it's nap time. It's time to go. You got to go to sleep because Pop needs to breathe here for a minute. So again, I want to say happy birthday to everybody. And if you had a birthday, man, God bless you, man. And may God give you many, many more. So I think that is it. Let me show you this little highlight here. And then we're going to jump right into the show. All right. Yeah, that's just a little highlights, right there. And I got Gilbert the third and Gilbert the fourth. I was trying to find Gilbert the third, on some highlights. They wasn't trying to give up no highlights, man. I was like, man, I want to see some highlights, but they got Gilbert the fourth, man. He had some highlights up there, so I thought I'd throw him on there. And I always tell everybody when they get on or they're coming to the show, I was like, man, y'all got to get a little promo of yourself. You never know when somebody gonna interview you, man. Especially you play a little ball, put a little 2-minute thing together, so you can just say, okay, I'm gonna send you this. I'm gonna just throw this up here. But welcome, family to the show. Both Gil and Gilbert are my wife's cousins, and they're in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I want to welcome you to the show, man. And you know what I was thinking about, Gil? I was thinking about the missed opportunities. And I knew you were, first you were in New Orleans, right? Doing the broadcasting in New Orleans, and then you in Charlotte, or you were in Charlotte first and then went to New Orleans and came back. How many games I missed? I mean, I could have went to a bunch of Charlotte games, man. I was thinking about that. I'm literally only went to like 2, right? I mean, when it first happened, when they built that beautiful arena,
yeah,
right? And I was like, man, this is like going home. I'm born in Plymouth, North Carolina,
okay,
right? So, the Southern cooking. I was thinking like I went to the arena when they first opened the arena, had barbecue and all that kind of stuff at the arena. I was like, man, I could have had a bunch of, times there. And and we went recently, a couple of years ago, I think before the pandemic, we were at the Knicks. We seen the Knicks and the Charlotte Hornets at the game, man. But welcome you both, man. This is exciting.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thanks for having us. Glad to be here. Like you mentioned, it's his family, so I'm glad to be on with family.
Yeah. So my wife is always telling me about family, man. I know about family, man. Just awesome. But that's 3 questions I focus on in the very beginning is the importance of family, right? The importance of faith, and the importance of education. So take us, I guess, Gail, you could take us back a little bit. About family and that and the whole process, getting down to Gil the Fourth,
Well, you talked about throwing your pebble out in your intro and in the ripples, and then when you were talking about the Hall of Fame, the Bronx Hall of Fame, and you were saying how inspiring listening to Nate Tiny Archibald was for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's my teammate. I played in Cincinnati. Nate and I are teammates.
Okay.
Nate and I go back a long time, and Nate, last time I talked to Nate, he had a phenomenal, it's not a record, but I reminded him, Nate's got 4 children, and all 4 of his children have the same birthday in the same week of May. 1 year apart. And he said, you remembered that? I was like, yeah, that's kind of stuff you don't forget. All of his children have the birthday in the same week of May and 1 year apart. And so I remember the first time I saw Nate at a basketball practice in Cincinnati. It was the last year the team were the Cincinnati Royals. And he came in and he had his hair in plaits and he had on some jeans and a shirt. And I looked at somebody, I said, they let kids come in the locker room, and what's up with that? He said, man, that's Tiny. And I was like, oh yeah, because he was exactly that. But I also saw him get 49 one night and 55 the next night, because I've never seen a guy who could put so much energy and moving and left-handed, and Nate just did a lot of great things. Then you mentioned LIU, and you mentioned Ortiz, and you talked about, I've got a cousin who went to LIU and played basketball on the intramural squads. His name is Norwood Harris. And he talks about LIU, and he talks about the basketball there, and he talks about meeting Floyd Lane. All the things that you were talking about, an extension of a family of where I played ball, of a family member that goes back to all the things that you touched on. And then you talked about the things that you point out. You mentioned the Covey. Well, Stephen Covey has an older book called Principle-Centered Leadership, which is one of the best books I've ever read. And I tried to pass it on to people who ran basketball teams that didn't necessarily want to look at it and get any information from it. And you just touched on things that are so relevant in terms of our faith and our joy and things. And on the 9th of October, I was blessed at our church to do the Men's Day service. And my message was, and this is a message I'm going to start with, and then I'm going to get out of the way and let my son get involved. But this message is about the kind of things that hit us in life, Lowe's, things that weaken us. At least that's what we think, and it knocks us to our knees. And when the devil knocks you to your knees, he thinks he's got you. But what the devil doesn't realize, and unfortunately sometimes what we don't realize, is on our knees is where we find our strength. That's where your strength is. When you find that strength that you find on your knees, it gives you the strength to stand up and deal with the stuff that knocked you to your knees. Feel forward.
I mean, now I gotta start going first because that's hard to top. That's hard to top. But I think for me, thinking about the intersection is a good way to put it, and thinking about just how everything kind of goes hand in hand. I was born into a number of things. Growing up around that family aspect that my dad talks about with basketball, and then thinking about you working for the team when I was born and throughout the first 18 years of my life, and that kind of being a secondary family where people would kind of see me grow up, and the basketball family, as far as like, you would travel and players would come and go, coworkers would come and go. We moved a couple times, and thinking about how family and even in the sense of us moving when I was 8 years old, family kind of kept us grounded, because when we were first starting in Charlotte, we have a huge network of family here. All our family, pretty much, or our closest family, our immediate family is all in North Carolina. And then we moved to New Orleans, and it's just us three. And for 10 or so years, it was us three where we would come back to North Carolina and be with our family here. But it was difficult for me, whether it was moving at 8 years old, changing schools, things of that nature. But my family kept me grounded, and basketball kind of served as the thing that kind of allowed me to be immediately kind of welcomed into new environments. It's easier to be the new kid at school when you can kind of join a team and have that built-in friendship with people. And that was true for me all the way through college. So thinking about how those things intersect and kind of the ways those things go hand in hand, and the communities that you get from having, whether it's a church family or a basketball family or a school family. I think that is something that I learned a lot over the years, and it was definitely fostered in our home.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys ended up going from North Carolina, from Charlotte to New Orleans. I mean, what would I mean, I've been to New Orleans. My wife and I was there for National Boys and Girls Club Conference. So talk a little bit about, that mindset, going from North Carolina to New Orleans. It's totally different.
Yeah, it's very different. And people would ask, what's different? What's different? I mean, and there's a lot of things. We come to love New Orleans, actually. And we met some wonderful people in New Orleans. But one time that question was posed to me, Gil, what's the difference between New Orleans and Charlotte? I said, well, Charlotte is the Bible Belt and New Orleans is the halter top.
Oh, man. Yeah, I hear you.
But when we got to New Orleans, a lot of things was happening. The team moving to New Orleans was obviously the emphasis of our moving there. And so with that brought a lot of attention to us as members of the organization. There was a lot of controversy in the team leaving Charlotte, and a lot of things went on between the league, the ownership here, and then moving to New Orleans. New Orleans was very excited about it. They'd had a team before. They had the Jazz. That's an ABA team, and they were
NBA team.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
New Orleans Jazz.
They didn't want to lose their team, and they lost their team. And of course, all the love that they put into the Saints, and they really, really love the Saints, and also their local sports. Tulane basketball, Baton Rouge, LSU, and the greatness of their football program. And when Shaquille came through, their basketball program was pretty good.
Yeah.
So when we got to New Orleans, we were welcomed because of the entity that came along with us. And I remember my wife, which is the cousin that you and I, we share that family with Patrice and Dee Dee and everybody. Her dad was a Presbyterian minister, so she grew up Presbyterian, and we tried to find a Presbyterian church in New Orleans to keep that tradition going. And we had difficulty finding a Black Presbyterian church. It was so small and had almost no programming. So we went to this huge Presbyterian church called St. Charles Presbyterian Church, and that's where the Manning family attended. So it's a huge edifice made of stone. But what I wanted was I wanted my son to have an environment where people would know him no matter what side of town he went on. That his daddy broadcasts for the Hornets, but he also attends St. Charles Presbyterian Church, and he would not be a foreigner. He wouldn't be a stranger in that city, and that worked out really, really well in terms of his AAU, his high school. He won't tell you, but one of the things I'm most proud of, my son made 2 all-state basketball teams while in Louisiana. And that's no small thing because he played at a charter school where he had to test to get in because he's a pretty smart kid. And he played basketball and he made friends. And some of his best friends now are still in that area. Every time those guys get married, they call him up all over the country to this destination, this and all. But there are people who love him and love us down in New Orleans. And New Orleans is family. When you go down to New Orleans and somebody says, "Where did you go to school?" They're not talking about LIU or Wake Forest or Catawba. They're talking about what high school you went to. That's their reference. They're a family-oriented city, and they accepted us, and we had a great 10, 12 years down there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, because I was 8 years old when we moved down there, it was a bit of a culture shock, and that might be putting it lightly. It was a bit of a culture shock, and I think it took time for it to grow on me. I think it was just in a sense of, I had, like any kid, right? Like I had friends here that we would have sleepovers and guys I like to play basketball with and things of that nature. And the biggest thing I think that I missed was having my family, because that was what we were rooted in. Every Sunday after church, we would go, to my grandmother's house, and we would have our family gatherings. And not having that was something that I didn't realize then, but that was something that was really missing for me. And you can't replicate that. But like my dad said, it didn't take long for the city to grow on me, and my best friends are still down there with their wives and their families, and I get a chance to go down there as much as possible. I think it's a city that's easy to fall in love with just because of how genuine and kind the people are. They call it the Big Easy because people are laid back, people are very relaxed. I actually was talking to some coworkers the other day, and they asked me, hey, what's your favorite restaurant down there? I was like, honestly, my favorite restaurant is whoever's mom is cooking, because that's that. You're not gonna get any. You're not gonna go to a restaurant that's got better food than something you can have at somebody's house. So, New Orleans is a unique place. And one thing I push back on that, he said they love the Saints. Love might not be a strong enough word. I think the Saints down in New Orleans. So it's a special place. There's nothing like it. So. Just looking back on that and moving multiple times in life, because we were displaced because of Hurricane Katrina, and thinking about, how difficult it was and how, in a lot of ways, it was kind of unlikely for us to end up going back, but to go back there and to get a new appreciation for the city, knowing everything that it's gone through and been through and how it's bounced back, because now it's been, they dealt with a hurricane last year, but it's been almost, going on 18 years since Katrina hit. So thinking about that as well is something that, if you were there at that time, you always have and we left during the storm, but if you were living in the city at the time, you have a special connection to that city that can never be taken away.
Yeah, and then you're talking about the halter top, and then you named the team the Saints. And we went to this. Went to the restaurant, the Tale of Two Sisters, I think it's, yeah.
Quarter Two Sisters.
Huh?
Quarter Two Sisters.
We used to go there.
Yeah. And we went down. We were down there, and of course JB Smoove was with us. We were walking through New Orleans, and we went in, and they made special arrangements for his wife. At the time, she was vegan, and man, they made amazing. Man, we had to taste. She had, you gotta taste this. This is the best vegetable, and because they recognized JB, and we were having a great time. He was being inducted into the Boys and Girls Club, National Boys and Girls Club Hall of Fame, and he's from Mount Vernon. So we just had a great time down there. And in the hotel we were in, it was a place. They had the oysters. I mean, I guess they baked the oysters inside. I forgot the name of that place, man. But man, every time I think of New Orleans, I think about, man, I got to get me some of them oysters.
Well, those charcoal grilled oysters, I talk about them all the time. They're called Dragos, and if you
that's where it was. We was in that hotel.
If you aren't careful, you'll start eating them as an appetizer, and you look around and you won't have a place for your meal because you've had about 4 dozen charcoal grilled oysters. Yes, sir. I miss them now, bro.
Yeah. I was like, every time somebody mentioned they in New Orleans, I'm like, oh, the Dragos, get me some. Yes, I've been tempting to you. They got a thing where you can order them.
Yes.
And they can send them up to you with a little grill on how you cook them and stuff like that. I don't think it's gonna work out, but
I hear you, bro.
Yeah. Oh man, but yeah, and the whole process was, I think, with Charlotte, Bill Johnson, right? Was it
Bob Johnson?
Bob Johnson was the owner, which I was proud of.
He came in after we left. And there was a lot of politics going on down here at that time. When that beautiful arena you talked about was being constructed, there was another one being constructed at the same time in the league in Detroit, the Palace at Auburn Hills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first arena, not the one where they play, not the one where the Hornets play now, but the first arena. And they built that first arena to hold 23,000 people, but it was to compete for the ACC tournament. Excuse me. And it was to compete against the building in Chapel Hill called the Dean Dome, where the University of North Carolina plays. But what happens in the league is all your tickets that you sell at the door and season tickets go into the pot for the league to split among themselves so they can have, all of the things with the contracts that they give to the players. The suites that are built in your arena, you as an owner, you get all that money. Well, the arena here in Charlotte only had 8 suites. The arena in Detroit had like 32 suites. So the owner here wanted a new arena so he could make more revenue from the suites. And they said, we just built this new arena. We can't build you another one, and we can't add any suites to the one that you have. So he said, well, I got to leave Charlotte. I got to get up out of town and go where I can make more money. And that's where all of the problems started, with him wanting a new place to get more revenue. And he ended up moving the team to New Orleans. And then they built a new arena after he left for Bob Johnson. And that's where they play now.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of to digress for a moment, talk a little bit about education and basketball. And I think both of you guys ended up going to Wake Forest, which was one of the schools. I looked at all the schools in North Carolina, because my family was from North Carolina, and I wanted them, my grandmother and grandfather, and all the aunts and uncles and cousins and stuff like that, get a chance to see me play. And my number one choice was North Carolina State. I mean, I followed after the kind of David Thompson. I was a big David Thompson fan.
Rightly so.
Yeah. And actually, Norm Sloan said I was a miniature David Thompson, with the vertical and, all those things. He recruited me. And that's a strange story, but I did want to go to North Carolina State. But West Virginia came in and just, after they stopped, I didn't hear the communication stop from North Carolina State. And there's another whole story on that. But West Virginia came in and kind of, showed me some stuff on Jerry West, showed me the new arena. And next thing you know, I was a mountaineer. But
what you're not telling everybody is Gail Catlett recruited you. That's why you went to West Virginia.
No.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that too. I know.
Yeah. Gail was another whole mindset, but he came in after I was an All-American as a sophomore. He came in, and it was his team. And
yes, indeed.
Yeah. So that was another whole world. But you guys ended up, it's just certain schools that stick out to you. With me, it was logos.
Hmm.
Yeah. So my first letter I received was from Kansas, right? And it had with that bird on it, the colorful bird. Yeah, I got it my sophomore year, and I carried around like I had somebody just gave me the MVP award. Then I started thinking like, who went to Kansas? Where is Kansas? Like that. Yeah, and knowing that Wilt Chamberlain was there, and I think JoJo White went there, and then I looked at Dr. Naismith, the creator of basketball, was a professor there, and started looking at the history of it. But and then more letters started to come. Of course, I received a letter from Wake Forest as well. I remember, I don't know what it was, the Demon. He got the hat on or something. Demon Deacons. Yeah. I remember looking at that very closely, being in North Carolina, right? So you guys end up going to Wake Forest. Gil, tell us a little bit about that transition, and then, man, your son ended up following.
Well, I'm so happy about my son following, and it's just a blessing that he and I have that in common. We got a lot of other stuff in common, DNA and blood. He loves his mama, and I'm crazy about her. So, but for him and I to share the alma mater, that whole legacy thing. So I go to Wake Forest in 1967, and I bring up 1967 because that's when things were changing in terms of integration and stuff, and particularly in the South. A lot of schools were trying to get that thing done, and of course, Carolina gets credited with having the first Black athlete in the ACC, a New Yorker by the name of Charlie Scott, who was a pretty good ball player. But that's not true. He wasn't the first Black athlete to play basketball in the Atlantic Coast Conference. Maryland had 2 basketball players that played. Charlie was the one that got all the attention and made the transition more of an issue, which it should have been. So give him credit for that. But we had another guy from New York that was at Wake Forest the same time Charlie Scott was at Carolina, from New York, who went to Power Memorial Institute, played along with Lou Alcindor, a guy named Norwood Todman. He was the first Black basketball player at Wake Forest, and Norwood came. And then that next year, another great New York guard, Lowe's, a guy who actually is second in scoring in public school history in New York City, went to Boys High, a guy named Charlie Davis, who was averaging 38 points a game and needed 27 to break Connie Hawkins' record. And they didn't let him play in the last game. But Charlie and I came to Wake Forest, and things got to be changed color-wise in the conference. We had Charlie Scott was at Carolina. A guy went to Davidson, which is not ACC, but Mike Malloy came out of New York, went to Davidson College. So the New York basketball thing was happening in the South. And I go to Wake Forest because it was a small school. It still is a small school in terms of 4,000 or 5,000 undergraduates. And some of the other places that I visited were just too big. I went to Indiana on an official visit, and the guy took me to where I'd catch the bus to go to class, because he said there were 35,000 people on campus. My hometown was 5,000 people. Ain't no way I'm going to no college with 30,000 people. My hometown was 5,000. So I think a lot because of the size and because they fought, and I had a chance to go there and play. I did finish Wake Forest as one of the few. I think we had 5 guys in the history of the school that maybe had a double-double for their careers, and I'm one of those 5. So I'm proud of that. And I came back to Wake Forest, Lowe's, after I finished playing basketball in Europe. And I was, because you talk about education, I was the academic advisor of athletics at Wake Forest for 5 years before I started broadcasting. My son is a pretty smart young man. He won't brag on that, but he had an academic scholarship to a small school in South Carolina. And he always felt like, I'll say, I'm so smart, why am I at this place? And so we kind of made some contacts, and a Kansas guy was the coach at Wake Forest at that time. When you mentioned Kansas, talking about Danny Manning, and they decided to look at Gil's transcript. And I remember talking to the dean. He said, you played at Wake, and all that's good. He said, and you got in touch with us. Said, but we saw your son's transcript, and it got nothing to do with you. Said, we want him to be a student at Wake Forest University. So, and my son transferred from Newberry College to Wake Forest, and that's where he got his degree, and he had a chance to be a walk-on there and play a little bit. And again, he and I have that as a legacy that we can share along with the DNA and the love of his mom.
Yeah, and so Gilbert, tell me a little bit about what that felt like. I mean, that
it was honestly kind of surreal because you talk about Wake Forest and kind of where the school stands, and you really understand it differently having gone there and been there. But I knew this my entire life. Whereas there's Carolina, there's Duke, there's NC State, and they have their huge fan bases, and Duke is more of like kind of a bandwagon thing. And Carolina, a bigger school, and NC State has a huge alumni base, but also they have a lot of fans. And it feels like Wake Forest, you either have to like kind of be from the community or have gone there to have been a fan. And my entire life, I mean, from the moment as early as I can remember, I was a Wake Forest fan. I don't know if this is true or not, but there's a story that when Wake won the ACC championship in '95 is the day I took my first step.
It's true.
So that kind of, so somehow, maybe it was kind of in my bloodline. So like, from the Chris Paul days to James Johnson and Jeff Teague and all those guys, I was always a Wake Forest fan. Like, when Wake Forest was on, when they got to be ranked number one in the country, when they played an NCAA tournament in New Orleans, we were there. We saw Ish Smith hit one of the a game winner in the NCAA tournament, which is really cool to see in person. So, for my basketball journey to kind of lead me there, and my dad talked about Newberry a little bit. I went to prep school after high school, played at Brewster Academy for a year in New Hampshire. We won a national championship. I played with some guys who went on to play in the NBA. Some are still there. But the recruiting process was pretty difficult for me. I looked at some D3 schools, some D2 schools. And I eventually settled on a D2 school, but it just didn't really feel like me. And it was hard for me to really feel like I was fulfilled in a situation that didn't feel like myself. And it kind of came down to the extreme last minute to lead me to Wake Forest. But a lot of things worked in my favor, and it helped, that I had the transcript that I had, and that we had the connection that we had, and we were able to talk to Danny Manning, and it all kind of worked out for me to go there. But that feeling that I had when I first saw a Wake Forest basketball jersey and I turned and saw my name on it, it's something, it was an unmatched feeling. That was something that really, it was kind of like, people talk about, when your younger version of yourself could see this. And I think like, 7, 8, 9-year-old me would have thought that was the coolest thing ever. And now as I look back, 6, 7, 8 years ago, as time has kind of passed, and I was looking through some old photos as I was sending some things, your way, it just kind of reminded me of just how great of an opportunity that was. Those 2+ years while I was there, I was there for 2 school years and a couple summers as well, in order to graduate, and being able to, play with the team and put Wake Forest across my chest, every game, and talk to my parents about stuff. And now to this day, whether we're talking about the basketball team moving forward or our football team, which is now pretty respectable, and going up there and going to support the program still and staying connected. I think it's awesome to be able to share that with my dad, and it's been a great thing. And I'm really glad, one of the best decisions I've ever made transferring there, and a lot of great things have come from it already.
Yeah, you probably, if you didn't transfer, you probably been thinking about it like, man, I wonder if I could have did,
Right.
and you went on and you did it. So yeah, sometimes this, yeah, I mean, I think we all want to, when we have a dad like yours, we definitely want to, follow in his footsteps,
Right.
or get close to it. I mean, sometimes it's challenging for kids, to, in my situation and my wife's situation, both of us being tremendous athletes at Mount Vernon High School, both of us receiving a full scholarship to play basketball. And then when you play at, a certain level, we always desire for our kids to, not be what they want to be, number one, but if they happen to pick up a ball, I would love to see, my son play, and definitely go to West Virginia. I mean, I didn't get anybody to. Well, my youngest daughter played at Fairfield. She followed my wife. She played at Fairfield, and then she got a master's at West Virginia. So yeah, it was kind of so real to see, like, oh, my daughter, where's your daughter? Oh, she's getting a master's at West Virginia.
Well, I had a conversation with my son about basketball, because basketball is really a lot of things. I think basketball is jazz. It's just a whole lot of things. And I told him that I know he loved the game and wanted to play the game, but I told him it would be hard, because it's hard to practice always, and to be focused always, and to compete internally and externally. And I also told him I didn't want him to play basketball because I played basketball. And I told him I didn't care what he picked up. It could be a violin. But I said to him, whatever you pick up, I expect you to give it your best. It can be basketball or it can be the violin. But whatever you pick up, I expect you to give it your best. And that was my only message to him. I was so happy. We had a little bookcase, and it had a basketball in the bottom of the bookcase. And he was crawling. One day he crawled by that bookcase and started hitting on the window where that basketball was. And I told him, it's time to get that basketball out and put it in his hands, because he's shown that that's what he liked to do. But it wasn't because I was trying to direct him in that direction. Not at all.
Oh yeah, I don't think even though we pulled out one time on the show, we had we pull up on the show where my wife and I were playing basketball on the playground, right? And they did an article. We was just getting ready to get married, and they did an article on us, after we got married, and everybody was like, "Man, we can't wait till you guys have kids." I'm thinking, like, what? What about kids? You don't think about it. You don't think about that you're going to have kids. Everybody's waiting for your kids because, they're going to be great athletes. They're going to be great people, and then, having kids, and then, determining for them to determine what it is that they love.
Yes.
Versus, trying to fit in a mold we create for them.
Yeah.
And that, to see them, grow up and doing their thing now, for me is the greatest reward.
Next to grandchildren.
Yeah. And, here's the other part of it when you talk about family. Look at all these connections, right?
Yes.
Coming down to see you guys, a few years ago, going down to Charlotte, visiting, making the connection. I mean, my wife got a number of family members. You want to know the history. They continuously learn more about the history of family. You connected with, with Frida, and look at all this. I mean, it just, the branches of the tree just keeps getting more and more amazing, and so, we see it even on my side, and Teresa's dad's side, recently, you just start to see how family grows, and how powerful and important it is, so, yeah. And then the history, we wouldn't know our history, man. And the things that, that, you experienced back then in regards to seeing the change.
Yes.
It's important to us. I think we have lost that, right? Where we haven't been very good recently at bridging the gap. So many of the kids don't know what happened on the other side and really don't care. Right.
Well, I agree with you, but I think there may be one other element. The distractions, the opportunities for distractions are so varied than when I was young. I'm not going to say when you were young and when Gilbert was younger, but I'm an old head, and so I didn't have as many distractions. When I grew up, there were 3 TV stations, and the TV stations went off at 12 o'clock at midnight, and they played the national anthem, and then you got a test pattern until the next morning. Now you got 24-hour streaming. You got 100 or 200 stations. You got stuff that you can watch a whole episode or 6 episodes of, whether it's you got all these things, all these quiz shows. You got games, you got so many things that can take your mind off of an issue or can distort the issue that your mind is on. And so our young people maybe sometimes seem a little bit non-committal or not concerned, but they're bombarded with so many things. That's why something like the Boys and Girls Club is so needed and so effective, because you can center them again on character, or you can center them again on execution, you can center them again on family. But if you don't have something to center them on, then they're going to be distracted by all the different things that marketing has sold to them and offers to them. And that happens at a younger age. And it also happens at some of our older young people who don't seem to be as concerned about issues as we would like for them to be.
Yeah. And the trend, talk a little bit about the transition, both of you transition from, school and ball, into, broadcasting, sportscaster, and then for you, Gilbert, the same thing. And because you kind of guys are in the, in different versions in regards to the NBA, as a sportscaster, and then Gilbert talk a little bit about, your transition from that into what you're doing. So start with Gil first, man.
Well, I had a chance to play 1 year in the league, played for the Cincinnati Royals, and then they moved to Kansas City as the Kansas City Kings, and they're now in Sacramento. And that's when I met the end of my career in the NBA. I had a chance to try out with Buffalo Braves because I played in the summer league against Bob McAdoo. And gosh, I had a team from Winston-Salem. He had a team from Greensboro. McAdoo served me up 44 in the summer league. I had 45. All right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And what he did is he told the people in Buffalo, the Buffalo Braves, you need to bring this guy in for camp. And they did. They brought me in for camp. And I performed pretty good. But Jack Ramsey was the coach, and he told me, he says, I'm going to cut you because I need to keep a rookie. He kept a rookie named Bernard Harris. He said, but I'm going to send you to St. Louis because my friend Jack McKeon is coaching out there. I've told him about you. I told him about your character. I think you can have a 5-year career in the ABA. I get to St. Louis, Lowe's, and they said, you got 4 practices to make the team. After the second practice, they gave me a contract. But I never played in a game, and it was so depressing and so disheartening. So I went to Europe, and I played in Europe for 7 years. I played a year in Italy, played 2 years in France, and 4 years in Belgium. And when I came back from Europe, it's when I worked for the March of Dimes, for the Chamber of Commerce, and then I got that job at Wake Forest as the academic advisor of athletics, expanded that program to the kind of programs you see today with tutors and computers and all those kind of things. And it was while I was at Wake Forest that I had a chance, because of a Wake Forest alum who's pretty known in the broadcasting industry, a guy named Billy Packer, who was my assistant coach when I was at Wake. And I had a chance to try out and get an opportunity to broadcast. The Hornets came to North Carolina when I was in my 5th year at Wake, and they wanted to get a broadcaster from one of the Final Four schools, Big Four schools, and they had planned on hiring a player from Carolina, the great Phil Ford. In fact, they sent Phil Ford to broadcasting school, and they were going to give him the job. But Dean Smith called him and said, I'd like for you to be an assistant on my coaching staff. And Phil Ford said, see you guys in Charlotte, and split. And they made him upset. But my practice games and tryouts were good enough that's what gave me the chance to get into broadcasting. And I worked for the Hornet organization for 24 years and 4 months, first on radio, then radio and TV, and then completely on TV for the last 15, 16 years of my career as a broadcaster.
Awesome, man. Yeah.
I want to ask, I remember I asked you how you got your start. You said you should do high school games in Winston-Salem.
Well, yeah.
And the reason I say that is because I was in Winston-Salem recently, and a guy who came up to me and said, I remember your dad. He did my high school games. I used to go home. I used to rush home to watch my game and hear your dad call call my game. So and you saying that just reminded me. I didn't tell you that when it actually happened, but so I know you got your start.
Yeah, his name was Henson, Mr. Henson.
Yeah. But you talk about following footsteps, and I knew that I didn't know especially when I was younger, I didn't know how long my basketball career would last. But I always knew that I wanted to do something similar to my dad, whether in the sports media world, one way or another. And broadcasting was kind of the big goal at first. But as I got older, I kind of assessed the ways in which I wanted to kind of break into the world, and especially when I'm walking on Wake Forest and playing at Catawba, I knew that the ball was going to stop bouncing pretty soon. So figuring out how I wanted to get started. And one thing that kind of came up in conversation, with my dad, and something I learned through some of the educators that I had, some of the professors and people that I worked with, was that I kind of developed the skill of being a pretty good writer. And I discovered a passion in informing people of things that they didn't already know, and also telling stories that people might not have known otherwise. And coming out of school, I was like, well, do I want to kind of get into a coaching or front office type role, or do I want to stick to this media thing? And as it worked out, I landed an internship with the Sporting News in the spring of 2018. And as my internship was winding down, I got called into an office. They pull up this. They have a TV screen on in the office, and they have it connected to a computer, and it's on NBA.com, but it looks a little different than normal NBA.com I'm used to. And they scroll down, and I see something with my name on it. I'm like, what's going on? So pretty much what happened while I was an intern, our company signed a contract with the NBA to cover to be the official website for NBA.com in Canada, India. We already were doing it in Australia, and a couple other countries in the Spanish language. And they asked me to be one of the writers. And it really was kind of a perfect alignment, perfect timing for everything. I grew up around the NBA, and I do cover other sports from time to time, but the NBA is really more what I know than anything. And being able to stay in that realm, and it's afforded me with a bunch of opportunities to interview Hall of Famers and be on site for all-star games and different types of events. And I found, I think the biggest thing, and it kind of aligns with, what I said about going to Wake Forest and doing what I do now, it doesn't feel like work. And I feel a lot of fulfillment and a lot of pride in the work that I'm able to do and the things that I'm able to do, on a day-to-day basis. So that's something I've really enjoyed, and I'm excited about continuing to go forward and doing more, in this realm. And I lean on my dad for a lot of advice, whether it's he goes and listens to podcasts and interviews and things that I do, and uses that, 24 plus years, 25 plus years, because you were doing high school too, 25 plus years of experience in the world, and it's expert advice. So I think that's it kind of went from, him giving me advice about how I need to follow my own shot and be a little more selfish on offensive end, to now how I can be better with my vocal fillers and things like that when I'm hosting and doing shows. So it's a perfect evolution.
I told my son, I said, Gilbert, when it's 50-50, choose you.
Well, yeah. I mean, some of us have to be told that.
And when it's 50-50, choose yourself.
Yeah. I mean, and that's one of the toughest things. When it's, you can be taught it. I think like a guy like LeBron James had to be taught, with all his gifts, that you're that guy. You have to be the guy that finishes this. You have to be the guy because in the beginning, it was just like, hey, that's my teammate. Boom, there's the ball. And when he was asked a question one time, okay, now you're with Miami Heat, who's going to take the last shot? And he says, whoever the coach called to play for, right? And I'm thinking like, and I was looking at the dream team, and Bird, Magic, and I think it was Bird, Magic, and Michael Jordan, and said, you know, at the end of the game, who's going to take the shot? And they all said, I am, you know, like, you know, and there's a different mindset, you know, that a player like myself, you didn't have to tell me to take the last shot. I mean, I already knew I was taking the last shot. I mean, you ain't got to convince me about that. But, you know, sometimes, you know, with my, you know, particularly with my daughter, I said, you got to take that shot. You know, she may be looking at, oh, I'm going to do what the coach said. I was like, okay, you do what the coach say later, you know, but you got to get that shot up.
You know, that's what rebounding for me became, because if I take the last shot, more than likely wasn't going in. But you know, I'm the cleanup man, and it took me a little bit later in life to realize there ain't nothing wrong with that, because everybody's gonna miss, including me.
Yeah,
but it's not over. It's not over if I go get it. I'm not talking about in a Rodman-like manner. I'm just talking about part of what you can bring to a circumstance, to a situation, not just on the basketball court. Because in life, we all miss a shot. And who's going to be there to clean it up? Somebody for us, or us for somebody. So being willing to rebound, to put it back up and score and win anyway, is not only a skill, but it's a mindset that wouldn't hurt everybody to have in life.
Yeah. And that well, I always talk about my dad. My grandfather used to call me over and say, hey man, I got a nugget for you. And I was thinking like, well, he gonna give me a nugget? I mean, you know, but and then when he started talking to me, I'm like, okay, a nugget is a little bit different than I thought, you know. So you know, on the podcast, people are always throwing out nuggets. I mean, or back in the little commercial back in the day with Damian Lillard and you know Kevin Love dropping dimes.
Yeah.
You know, I always say that people, you know, you just dropped a dime or you just gave us a nugget. You know, actually both of you have, because you know, so many of our young people today are their minds so set, right, that I'm gonna play basketball, you know, and I'm gonna get this scholarship to Wake Forest and I'm gonna play in the NBA, that we don't think about your stories right here. I mean, you played a year, I played 3 years. You know, but we don't think about what, you know, how vast sports is. You know, we only think about getting on the court. We don't think about the things behind the scene. People are working all around you, you know, and it's a perfect opportunity not only to just think about basketball, but think about what's going to happen when it's over. And you guys made the smooth transition. I'll say smooth transition into, you know, sportscasting and broadcasting, you know, into what you're doing in terms of the journal part of it. And, you know, our kids need to hear that, you know, see successful people doing other things in life. Their desire was to do something, but now, you know, I got to have something to fall back on. So,
Lowe's, you're all over it, and you just made me think about when I was broadcasting and the people that I'd run into that were involved with broadcasting, but they weren't in front of the camera. So when you say broadcasting, not you, but euphemistically, when the word broadcasting is thrown out, most people think about what it means to be in front of the camera or to be Stephen A. Smith. But what they don't realize is there's a director, there's a producer, there are technical people that have to put the broadcast together, much like Miss Patrice being behind what you do.
yes.
And I remember I heard him talking about a Chiron, and the Chiron was the machine. They don't call it that anymore because it's new technology now, but the Chiron machine was a machine that put up stats and put up headlines, all the written stuff that's on the screen before people start talking about it. And in Atlanta, they had something called Chiron School, but there were no minorities going to Chiron School. And if you got trained at the Chiron School, where you could do all this technical stuff and all this stuff that goes on the screen, you didn't have to only do it at sports events. They do it for the weather. They do it for the news. They do it for everything. So there's so many opportunities that a lot of our young people don't make themselves available for, because they're only thinking about what they consider the glamorous part of it. Now, if you didn't play basketball, somebody's probably not going to hire you to talk about basketball. But if you understand the Chiron and how to put up all the information, how to put up all the news, the technology, you can do that for the weather, for golf, for boxing. You can do it for everything. So you can have a career in broadcasting without necessarily being on the air as a broadcaster. And our young people need to hear that and understand that and find out about the opportunities that they can avail themselves of.
I think I think on top of that, and this is not necessarily from personal experience, but more so from a lot of friends that I've had that have gone on to play, several years overseas and things of that nature. I think that there's a kind of a fear, kind of an innate fear that guys have that it becomes your identity. You pick up a basketball at 4 or 5 years old, or however young you are, and you go throughout middle school, high school, college, and you play professionally for a few years. And now you start to realize, like, wait a second, like this is about to come to an end. And I think, admitting that for some people, like it's you can kind of come to terms with it, but others have a little more difficulty, not necessarily that that's their only identity, but it's just the fear with having to develop a new one. And I think the big thing is just, understanding, and I think that's what is good. I've heard just firsthand from guys who are playing in the G League or things of that nature, that they do have systems in place to use resources to kind of set you up for a career once the ball bounces, because there are very few of us that will play to the age of 40, and you're very fortunate if you play to the age of 30. But a lot of guys, I think, are fearful of, oh man, like I'm 30, I haven't had a desk job before, I haven't had this kind of job before, I've been playing basketball my entire life. What does that look like? How does that feel? How do I do that? And I think the big thing that kind of having, grounding yourself, one way or another, whether it's leaning on people who have done it already, leaning on the resources that are provided to you, I think that helps kind of ease that transition for those, because I think that's the realization that I had. It helped me to go to Brewster when, I was thinking, I'm the next best thing. Everybody's just sleeping on me. And then I see guys 4 or 5 inches taller than me that jump 10 inches higher than me, that run a little fast. I'm like, okay, these guys were born. This makes a little more sense. Let me start thinking about alternative pathways. And obviously I got the most out of my basketball career, and I'm very pleased with how it turned out. But when you think that I'm getting drafted in 3 years, and then you see guys who are actually getting drafted in 3 years and what that actually looks like, then you start to kind of readjust. But everybody has that realization at different points. I think that's the point when you can either kind of be fearful of what's next, or you can kind of embrace it and make the most of it for you. And I'm grateful that I was able to do that. But I know it's not as easy as it said. It's easier said than done.
Right. And before we transition into, we're going to talk a little bit of ball, but you got daughters.
Yeah.
And if they were balling, they'd probably be on the shore right now. But since they weren't balling, talk a little bit about them.
Well, we've had some interesting experiences in basketball. Is part of their experience too. My first wife and my first child, she was born when I was flying back from Italy. I made a team over there, and so I was flying back to the States the day she was born, and I got to go to Italy. And how stressful it must have been on a young mother having her first child, to take that child to a country that she didn't speak the language, and wondering what kind of health care we were going to have for a new baby. I mean, being a mom for the first time in life has to be enough stress, and leaving her mother and leaving her surroundings and going to Italy and wondering how we're going to take care of the baby. But we had an opportunity to live close enough to an Army base, and I could drive there, and had a pediatrician that was an American doctor on the Army base, and we could make that transition. And then my second daughter, Jennifer, was actually born in France when I was playing ball in Mulhouse. That's where she was born, and so they grew up as young children in a different system, and we were there for a while, but again, after a while, it was time to come home so they could be home. And so I could be home. But they can look back on those experiences and now extrapolate some very positive things in terms of places they've been and things they've seen that some people just read about, and some people they know only read about them. So there was some positives that were taken out of it. And for me, of like Gil was saying, I wasn't ready to make a transition away from basketball to something else. And I had a chance to continue to play basketball. In fact, I probably was concerned that I wouldn't be able to do anything else because I hadn't focused on anything else. But I had a chance to play it out in Europe. And that's what I did to get it out of my system. And I came back to stay around it, but not to keep trying to play. And I quit trying to play and tried to be successful at doing other things. But being in Europe helped me get it out of my system. And I think a lot of people need to get it out of their system. And it's a different time frame for some than it is for others.
Yeah. And it's crazy. We had some alignment here because I tried out with Kansas. You said you went from was it Braves? Which one you said? You said went from I was in Kansas that ultimately went to Sacramento.
Kings, when the first year I went with the team there, I didn't make the team there. That's when that's when I stopped playing for a while, and I tried out later on with the Buffalo Braves. But when Cincinnati moved to Kansas City, Omaha, I moved with them.
Okay, so it was Cincinnati. You went from Cincinnati to Kansas
City, Omaha,
right? Yeah. And then they became Sacramento. Well, I was in Kansas.
Okay.
And then they moved to Sacramento.
Okay. So we got another connection too, Lowe's.
Was that?
And I didn't even realize, because we're talking about the family, but one of your real good friends who holds you in such high esteem is someone who I hold in high esteem too, and that's Mike Tominski. We used to talk about you, but we talked about you not from you were married to someone that's in the same family that I'm married to. Just talked about you being a real good friend of his and him being a real good friend of yours. And I always thought a lot of Mike because Mike was broadcasting with the Hornets when I was broadcasting with the Hornets. So we've got connections.
Yeah, we were rookies together. I mean, we both came in drafted the same year. We competed against each other. We West Virginia played Duke before they became good. But yeah, my freshman.
I hate Carolina on game day. I hate Duke every day.
Yeah, we beat Duke when they had Gene Banks and Mike Jaminski. I was a freshman, and we beat Duke that year. We beat Notre Dame that year. I mean, we was beating a lot of people that year. And Coach Huggins was a senior when I was a freshman. So so we little connections, little connections there, and that was great times though, And Mike was amazing person, right? Talented basketball player, but in the league, and he was big, so he got a chance to, when you big and you need big people, and he was talented, but the one thing he was missing was like this dog inside of him,
He's too erudite. He's too smart.
He needed a Doberman inside of him. And so as we transition to talk a little bit about what we were talking about a little bit earlier, was that I never seen. Here's two things. Was the first time we played against the Houston Rockets, and Moses Malone was the center. And, this is no disrespect, but this is Moses, Moses. So he comes over to Kevin Lockery and he says, Kevin, you're not going to put the white kid on me, right? Like that. And I'm like, Kevin's looking at him like, don't put the white kid on me, and they did. And the game started, and Moses was like, he just literally took the ball and threw it off the backboard and he grabbed like 8 offensive rebounds before he dunked it, He was just knocking Jaminski all over the place. He was just throwing it up, boom, hit Jaminski, boom, hit him. He grabbed like 8 rebounds in the first play, and then he said, "Okay, I'm gonna lay it up now." And then Jaminski hit him upside the head, and he looked over. He looked over the locker room. He's like, "I told you what I tell you." I looked at Mike. Mike looked at me. I was like, "Hey, we can't help you down there." That guy was ridiculous, and because he had so much energy. And then we played against Denver and David Thompson, and everybody kept saying, David Thompson has a quick first step, And so I was like, okay, I want to see, I got a quick first step too, but I want to see him. I sent him to the middle. I want to see how high he really could jump, right? So I was like, okay, this early in the game, I want to see what he's gonna do. So I shaded him to the middle, and I just let him go. He took that first quick step, and then Mike Jaminski jumped up the like the dotted line, and David stopped, and he just went straight up, like a rocket. Like then he leaned over him, and he dunked it like that, and then he stood back up like stretch man. It went back down to play, and they called a foul on Mike Jaminski. So Kevin Lockyer is like, call timeout. Hey, Lowe's, you can't send him to the middle. I thought, okay, go. But I wanted to see, what he was gonna do, And after the game, Mike was like, Lowe's, you set me up. Oh man! So
I saw David Thompson play when he was 17 years old. We were at a basketball camp, and no one was talking about him here in the state. And Charlie Davis and I went to this camp at Gardner-Webb College, and we had college players there, and we had other high school players there. And at the end of the day, all the counselors play in a counselor game. So we're playing in this counselor game, and David Thompson is kicking our butts, all of us, everybody. In fact, Jack Marin, who had gone to Duke, was in the NBA, was guarding him, and David was jumping up, shooting his jump shot, and Marin was hitting him on the elbows, and David was just holding it there. Okay, hit me again. He hits on the elbow, he'd shoot his jump shot and bank it in, and he was dunking and block. And so we go back to Wake Forest, and we're telling our coach, Jack McCluskey, who had been at Penn before he came to Wake Forest, about this kid named David Thompson, who was a rising senior. He said, I never heard of him and never didn't go look for him, didn't recruit him. By the time they decided to talk to David Thompson, he had already committed to going to NC State, and we never, ever brought the kid in for a visit. We never looked at him. Sometimes people just hard-headed, they won't listen. But at 17 years of age, he turned the counselor game out.
Oh, man. So you guys talk. I mean, Gil, you've seen some amazing games, right? And Gilbert, you now interviewing some amazing people. So both of you talk about a moment, because I just have in my mind this moment of Michael Jordan. It's one of my favorite things in Come Fly With Me or whatever Michael's got going on, where he's got Trapuka, right? And he's and like he's on the left side, and he's like he's in the air for like 100 years, all the way to the other side. I mean, the basket, he's on the left side. He goes, and I'm like, some moments, your NBA moments, man. You're doing the game, and I know you rooting for your team, and then you had Grandmama and Kendall Gill and Morning. I mean, so talk a little bit, and then we'll transition over to Gilbert and talk about some current stuff.
Well, when the Hornets, were comprised, the first person they got from the expansion draft was Dale Curry, and we know what his seeds have done.
Oh yeah,
and Grandmama was a choice between getting him or getting Dikembe Mutombo. And I still think that we may have been a different franchise had we gotten Mutombo as opposed to Larry Johnson, although Larry Johnson was certainly great for the organization and it helped get the identity of the organization. But I always remember when they used to run this horns play and Larry would set a screen on the baseline for Dale to come off the screen and get the ball on the wing and shoot that real sweet jump shot. It was a little slower. It was a real sweet jump shot that his kids have now, although they've stretched it out and made it a little quicker. And sometimes Larry would miss the pick. And if Larry missed the pick, then Dale would run out to the wing, but he couldn't get the pass because the defender would still be on him because he didn't get picked. And then Larry would post up down low, and you'd have to pass the ball down into the And then when Alonzo came, it was a lot of things going on. It seemed like we just told this story yesterday. Larry, because of the grandmama, because of the gold toothers, because of the commercial, because of the dress and all, it was just a cultural phenomenon around basketball. And they kept making jokes with Larry about signing a contract for life with the Hornets. And the league had a flyer on how long you could sign a player, or at what age you could sign a player to a long-term contract. And you couldn't do it after 35. That's not the case anymore, but that's what it was then. So they signed Larry Johnson at 23 to a 12-year deal at $7 million per year. It was an $84 million contract, largest contract in team sports history, not just basketball, but in team sports history. But that upset the rest of the owners, because that contract set the price for basketball players at the time. So we go out and draft Alonzo Mourning, who was a better prospect than Larry. And when it was time to give Alonzo his contract, he said, well, I want more because I'm the best player on the team. The guy who owned the team was like, I ain't paying them two guys more money than I'm making. And so they end up trading Alonzo because they would not pay. And Alonzo's people did the math when they tried to say, well, we can give Alonzo this much. And they say, no, you can give Alonzo this much. And this is how much we want. And that sort of led to all kinds of things. The team moving to New Orleans, the team ended up being sold, taken away from the owner. But that's what happened now. Kendall Gill, you mentioned, who was a really good player, not a great shooter, but Kendall Gill was a really good player, defender, and could rebound his position. But he didn't have the best relationship with Larry and Muggsy Bogues and Dale. Larry, Muggsy, and Dale were three very close people. They loved each other. They supported each other. And they used to call Kendall Solo. He was off on his own, all by himself. And so it was a young team that at that time was actually considered the up-and-coming franchise in the NBA. But things happen and relationships, we were talking earlier before we got on the air about what happened in Golden State. But if the relationships don't really grow into a brotherhood, that's a strong brotherhood, because people don't really understand that. They hear it, they'll say it, they'll read about it, they know it's in scripture when two or more are gathered together, but they don't really believe that. But when two people get together in the spirit of one goal and they really share the same spirit, it's very difficult to stop those folk. And a team that puts itself together and shares the same spirit, the same goal, and are willing to fight for each other as opposed to fighting with each other. Same thing in a marriage, same thing in a family. You don't realize what you can accomplish when you work together. People say it, but it's only words, it's only verbiage. They don't really mean it. And until they try it, they have no idea of how much they can accomplish when they work together.
Yeah. And Gilbert, today, we're in a different NBA, right? So, talk about some of the interviews and some of the things that you see around the league. I mean, transitioning from, your dad to now and the players today.
I think the coolest part about that, excuse me, in my perspective, sorry about that. I think the coolest thing about that, in my perspective, is just that I have the background and growing up around the game and knowing the history of the game through my dad. When I was younger, had an opportunity to be a ball boy for the team. So at the age of 8, I was a ball boy for the Hornets from 8 to 17 or 18 years old. So I was able to see the game up close, from, when I was super small to bigger. So the biggest thing that I always talk about is being able to see Chris Paul play night in and night out, so kind of talking about the transition from when I was, Baron Davis was a point guard when I started doing it, and then go from him to Chris Paul, and then the years past Chris Paul, and seeing that up close, and then now transitioning to seeing some guys who I played with, like TJ Warren, a guy who went to NC State, his jersey's in the rafters. You can still wear his number, but it's up there by David Thompson's number, who nobody can wear again. So, having a guy like that and a guy who I consider to be a really close friend, and having an opportunity to interview some legends. There was an opportunity when All-Star was here in 2019. I got to talk to George Gervin and Gary Payton and Glenn Rice, but also seeing guys now in today's game. And one thing you talked about was teams that like each other. And I think that it shows. We talk about the young talent in the league today. Whether it's Luka Doncic, who's 23 years old, which when I think about how young he is, that blows my mind. Or Ja Morant's 23. Zion Williamson is 22 years old. There's so many young guys. Devin Booker, I think, just turned 26 years old. So there's so many young guys in the NBA. But more than that, I look at the Pelicans. I look at the Grizzlies, and I see how the camaraderie they have in post-game interviews and how guys are cheering for one another, and guys that genuinely look like they enjoy playing with one another and look like they're happy about team success first and foremost, but they're happy to see their brothers succeed. That is what I find to be the most exciting and the most fun teams to watch these days. I was just watching the Grizzlies have a rookie who played at Wake last year, and he's a lot's being asked of him for a team that was really good last year. He's coming in as a rookie, and I watched one of his interviews, and all his teammates were crowding around him and kind of egging him on and hyping him on. Like that's the fun stuff that I enjoy seeing, and I think it's an interesting landscape now because we talk about young people and kind of what they're interested in, and there's a different type of fan nowadays. I think younger fans now kind of latch on to players more so than teams, and right or wrong, as long as the interest in the game is still there. But I kind of feel like I was kind of the last generation where we were like, man, like I'm a diehard Hornets fan. I love my Lakers. I love my Celtics. Where now it's like, man, I'm riding with LeBron. I'm riding with KD. I'm riding with Ja. I'm riding with Luka. Whatever the case may be. So I think it's very interesting to kind of see how that evolves, and I think it's important though to continue to bridge the gap and understand how, hey, there's elements of Magic and Bird in Luka's game. This is why, Ja is a little like Iverson, but mixed in with this and that. So to understand that those people are, the people who paved the way, and that these guys are now taking the game and taking it to another level. Steph Curry reinvented the way the game is being played in a lot of ways. And I think it's going to be interesting to look at, how we tell the stories of a lot of these guys now, because, this era of basketball, from LeBron to Durant to Curry, and now the next generation are a lot of the all-time greats. And let me mention Giannis as well, who is still 27 years old, which is really wild to think that he's younger than I am.
Yeah.
Guys who are doing things and taking the game, to a greater level. I think the talent is at an all-time high, but it wouldn't be possible without what was set by earlier generations. And I think it's just important for people to remember that.
Yeah, no. I know, yeah. So, wow, this has been awesome, man. We may need another show, just to talk, some of the integral things that are going on, and getting your thoughts on some of the integral things, in like you just mentioning, from the past to the present, and shaping those things.
Well, Lowe's, one thing I want to say that, I would think it'd be another good show, because when I played, we didn't have respect for the European player. And then it went from not having respect for the European player to talking about the American white player wasn't playing basketball anymore. So the European white player was coming over to take their place. Well, now the top players in the league, if you put 10 top players in the league, more than 5 of them are going to be not from America. And that didn't used to be the case. So there's an evolution of the game, starting with that dream team that showed the world what it could be. And then basketball without borders. And then what's happening in the continent of Africa, and how Obama was involved with that, and how they got a league there, and how you get your Giannis and other players, or Luka, or folks coming from all over the world to play this game that was our game, invented in Kansas, as you brought about. But now it's been taken to another level by people who ain't from Kansas anymore.
Yeah. I'm gonna have trees pop in here, so we're about to close it out. Where's she at?
It's pretty awesome for me to hear my big cousin and my little cousin, chatting it up on this podcast today. I'm really proud of both of you. What I really admired most during this entire podcast was there was something about Gil's face while Gilbert was talking about his experience. There was this level of pride that seemed to just ooze off of you as a father. And it's really a blessing. But I wanted to let you know that similarly, as you were talking about yours, your son had the same look. It's a blessing for a father-son relationship to really be exemplified. What I heard Gil say was, my father went to Wake Forest. It was surreal for me to be there. My father was an announcer. It's surreal for me to experience this. Talk about the cultivation of the father-son relationship. And as we close out, how important that is so that young men would look up to their fathers the way you do, and fathers would cultivate their sons the way you have, Gil.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. And there's a specific, you see, my father, I don't have any siblings. I have no brothers or sisters. My father was a typical father whose son born in the late 1949. My father, I used to say, if he could, he would have had a badge on his clothes that said, "I'm your father." When my dad said we were going to do this, that, or the other, there was no, well, what's that about or why? There was no discussion and no asking. It was you do it, and that was it. And so for a while, I grew up being a little bit afraid of my father. I certainly didn't challenge my father. What my father said went. What he said goes. And that's how everybody's father was during that time. So that's not a knock on him. But I remember being in Europe and I saw fathers and sons saying that they loved each other. And I remember coming back from Europe, and the first time I told my dad, "I love you, Dad," he didn't know what to do with it. He didn't know how to respond to it. He didn't know what to do. But I started doing that every time, and I kept saying, "I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad." And it got to the point where he would even say it first. Well, I vowed that my son would never be able to tell that story. He would never be able to tell the time that he remembered when his daddy didn't say he loved him, because every day of his life, I had a chance to tell him I loved him. And I did that. And I remember one day that was really important to me, and he might not remember it. We were in New Orleans at a barbershop. And this guy sat down while we were waiting to get our haircut. And this guy sat down beside us. And he said, yeah, you do the Hornet games. And I said, yeah. He said, "Hey, I watch you on TV and do the games." I said, "Okay, that's good." He said to Gilbert, he said, "Oh, I bet you're proud of your dad, ain't you?" And I stopped. I said, hold it, wait a minute. I said, "No, I'm proud of my son. He ain't got to be proud of me. I'm proud of him."
Oh.
And that's what counts. Everything I've tried to do and want to do is to let him know how much I love him and I'm proud of him.
See, I told you, I knew you was messing me up. Gil, I don't know, Gilbert, I don't know how you gonna handle that, but it's your turn now, little cousin.
I think that's it. I think coming up, it was always a type of thing that my dad was like a superhero. To be at a young age, to be able to, my dad was on the road a lot, but he was on the TV, and I could go to the TV and see my dad, and it was something that was an experience that kind of it shaped a lot of who I was when I was younger, because in a literal sense, I've always looked up to my dad. I still do. He's a couple inches taller than me, but figuratively, just the example that he set for me, the love that he showed me, and also the example that he showed by the way that he loves my mom, right? And just always, I think the big thing that, because of what my dad did as far as traveling and working, he wasn't always physically there, but I always knew that he was, and not even in a sense of like, he wasn't around, but he was working, and he was working for us to help us out and continue to make us proud, because there was nothing like when my mom and I would sit around the TV and watch my dad and listen to my dad talk. Thinking about like, he was on the road for a game during my senior night, but he spoke at my graduation. And I will always have that moment. I think back to, the commencement speaker shakes everybody's hand when they come across the stage. But I remember my dad gave an amazing speech, and then I get up to the stage and give him a handshake and a big hug, and the entire auditorium just goes, oh, and it was just a moment we shared, and having so many things to share just gives me such a sense of pride in being my dad's son, and sharing his name, and when people hear my name and say, is that your grandfather or your dad? And like, that's my dad. The stories that I hear, about my dad and how great of a man he was when they knew him and how great of a man he still is. I think that's what gives me the ultimate pride and sets the standard that for me to try to uphold, to live up to the name and the legacy that he's laid, for our name, and taking it every generation on. You mentioned me being the fourth, so I think that's the pride that I get that comes in being Gilbert McGregor and doing what those before me were able to do.
I tell you, you really. When I saw you walk in the church the other day after Uncle Sonny passed and at the service, not only do you look like your dad, but you look so much like your grandfather. You look like Odell, a tall Odell, and my uncle Odell. And so it was really impressive, to see you. And I've watched you grow up from a little boy, and you're an amazing man. I'm not sure what life has in store for you. I'm not sure if there's a beautiful girl that has snatched you up yet, but I tell you what, you have a legacy to continue, because we have a strong family and we have a loving family, and I'm so proud of both of you. So tremendously very proud of you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us on, Lowe's. Thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome. My pleasure. And I think we got to get off here now. But
I think your mom has a note from Mr. Gilbert.
Oh yeah.
She said, I know how you feel, because I'm proud of all my children. Oh, there's one of your children standing next to you.
Yeah.
That's your cousin.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, Ron.
So,
Yes.
So just enough.
Yeah.
That's the same. They have the same father-son relationship. So we get it, and it's good to be able to have. I'm proud of. I love great fathers, and I'm lucky to be able to say that the husband I have, that man right there, Losmore, is an amazing father too. So it's pretty awesome to be able to say that. So I love the show, and I'm glad you guys were able to come on.
Glad to do it.
All right. Well, give me a moment. I'm gonna close out here, and then we can talk for a few minutes, and then we got some other stuff going on down here. But so again, this is Losmore. I want to say again, thank you for your support of the Blueprint Podcast, man. You guys know I love you, and I look forward to seeing you each and every week, man. When y'all pop up, your questions, comments, different things like that, man. I can't say enough. I mean, you guys have just been great. I want to thank Gil and Gil, number 3 and 4, for coming on the podcast, man. I love you guys out there. God bless you. And look, hey, if you wake up tomorrow, hey, make tomorrow your masterpiece. God bless you.
We really hope you enjoyed this episode of Losmore, the Blueprint Podcast. Stay connected and follow us at our website, www.losmore.com. That's LOWESMOORE.com. You can also join the discussion on Twitter at Losmore and on Facebook at Losmore Jr. As always, thank you for pushing your mindset towards a better reality. This concludes the most thought-provoking portion of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast to stay fully up to date with everything we're up to. Until next time, be kind to yourself and each other.
What they teaching is a joke. I ain't buying it like I'm broke. Insufficient funds for insignificant.